Well, thank you all for coming. I'm Carol Ann Robb. I do the reference and adult services at the Pittsburgh Public Library. The brains behind this afternoon is our director, Bev Clarkson, who's
don't put that on me.
Well, she was the one who suggested Melissa, and I ran with it. So it's a joint effort. She's much more techie than I am. I am the book person. So thank you all for coming. Melissa has a couple of books. Well, I guess 3 that are available. And rather than make her tell you how to get them, I will tell you, you can get them on Amazon. But if you feel so inclined, please help the independent bookstores out. They are hurting. And so in the state of Kansas, I checked this morning, both Raven Bookstore in Lawrence and Watermark Books in Wichita have copies or can get copies to you. And with the chapbook, I don't know, you'll have to contact Melissa about that one. So again, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. I'm sure Melissa appreciates it. This is my first try at a virtual meeting, and if it goes well, there might possibly be more, because man, I don't have to make any refreshments, I don't have to set up, I don't have to clean up. This is kind of fun because afterwards I can just go sit on the couch. But first of all, we're going to enjoy Melissa. We will be muting you. Chat if you have questions or comments, and Melissa, take it away.
Okay, thank you again to the Pittsburgh Public Library, the library of my heart. And thank you everybody for being here. This is just so cool and really special. So I'm mostly going to be reading new work from a manuscript that I am sending out into the world right at, as we speak, and hopefully someone will want to publish it sometime soon. The original title was Once and Future Selves, but a poet friend of mine very rightfully suggested that that was maybe too on the nose. It's exactly what it's about. And so that is the secret subtitle that I am just...
Oops. Melissa?
I just unmuted myself. I'm
okay,
good.
Great, thanks.
And I did it again. I think we're good. Yeah, okay. Like you could just be the host if you want. Okay. So I've gathered poems mostly from the new manuscript, but one from my first book on this topic of like kind of this idea of the versions of ourselves we are now versus the past versions of ourselves, and even weirdly future versions of ourselves, and imagining, what that might be. And so this first poem was inspired by, I remember when we could travel, I went to San Diego, and I had a day all to myself, and I spent it people watching in Balboa Park. And this old woman was there beside me, and she was also people watching and also writing. And then I decided she was probably me come from the future. It was very weird. And so I wrote a poem about that, and it is called Sitting Next to Myself as an Old Woman. Both on vacation in San Diego, we prefer the lily pond to the zoo. I know she's me, scribbling poems on a legal pad. I'm less vain in the future, toenails unpainted, the color of seashells scrubbed clean. My black sandals' bulk conforms to the curve of my arch. I sit on a folded blue tote, my legs cooled by damp grass. She notes and I note. A man sings his bicycle up 3 steps. A woman prays over her open map. I stop writing only when my future self unfurls each yellow sheet. On the top page, legerdemain and punctilious, words I have not learned yet. Before I walk away, I take off my sunglasses. I look right through myself. And so I keep returning to this idea of my future self. Oh, thank you. I see like the fun ways people are applauding. I love it. So I have another one of these future self poems, and It's a form poem. It's a duplex, which is a form that Jericho Brown invented. And so you'll hear a lot of repeating lines, and then the last line is like repeated from the first line. And it's my weirdo idea of a love poem. So there's my husband again. And so duplex for my future self. My husband making coffee in the kitchen or dead. Tell me, future self, so I can be ready. If he's dead, I need to be ready, so tell me. In 30 years, will this house still be ours? In 40 years, will this house still be ours? On the porch, I dare a glance behind me. On the porch, I glance behind me again, to my husband or my reflection. Now my husband causes this reflection, the man on stage who shook his long hair back. The man on stage shakes his long hair back, my husband, an answer I don't yet know. My husband, the answer I don't yet know. Is he alive inside, making coffee? Okay, so if that poem struck you as dark, you would not be the first person to think of my poetry that way. I don't know what made me decide to include this in today's reading, but I've never done this before and I thought it seemed fun. I'll tell you the story of like 4 years ago, a complete stranger wrote me on Facebook and she said this: I inquired about your book recommended by a friend. I followed your link to purchase it. I was impressed by the photo atop its page and by the photos here on your personal page. Please consider this a gentle suggestion to someone I hope is very successful. I do have some professional experience, so please accept it with some degree of consideration. I read the poems you have on the site, and please consider starting with more pleasant ones. I'm sure your dark ones are good, but my background in publishing and marketing tell me they will turn potential customers off. You might have better luck if you entice them with your most uplifting light poems, then interest them with the contrast of the dark ones. Good luck to you. So that, yeah, like total stranger wrote me that. And it hurt my feelings at first. And then I thought, well, that was some condescending nonsense. And I just, even though I'm definitely open to feedback, I don't know if I'm open to the kind of feedback that just like tells me what I can and can't write about, you know, like that doesn't seem okay. Also, there's this like idea, like she liked my photos. Like, what does that mean? Like I should be like this pleasant girl writing pleasant girl poems? I don't know. I hated it. So, but I do know that we're living in like a really hard time right now. And when I went through my poems, the ones I did pick, my best ones, are kind of dark. So I thought, well, I guess I'll explain that I don't think of myself as a dark poet. You know, I'm not like Edgar Allan Poe, but writing is a way to heal and to understand. And so a lot of these will be really weighty. And so I'm not trying to bum you out, I promise. But if you're interested, here's the poem that inspired her to write me. So it is called The Dead, which I admit is a dark title. All right, so The Dead. I wished dead the girl who told me in 3rd grade I was adopted. I'd believed her over my dad. 4 years later, her family's car ran a stop sign and a semi blew into their back seat. I picture her at a table with my father, a new Adam's apple plugging the hole cancer made. They don't talk about the town. They don't talk about me. The dead don't remember. I like to think he has a dreamlike idea of me and she of her father. At the table, she pours tea. He tucks the lace cloth into his shirt. They're together because isn't that nicer than sitting alone? And I'll follow up and say that I did write her back. And I told her that I thought that poem was weirdly light, you know? It's like, I didn't know what I was doing in 3rd grade when I wished a person dead and then that person died. That's intense. So I tried to like make up for it, you know, by placing her in the afterlife at a table with my dad. I don't know. I don't know. So to me, it's about hope, but sometimes hope comes in, you know, strange forms. So, and sometimes hope comes from like rewriting what happened into what you hope happened or what you wish happened. And that's what happens in this next poem, which is my most brand new poem. I just wrote it like 2 days ago. I haven't even revised it. It shouldn't see the public yet, but I'm doing it. So I'm in a class with my good friend, Tracy Brimhall. She's the teacher and she's so wonderful. And I just wrote this based on one of her prompts. So it's called If a Poem. Other poems for my father's illnesses. The laryngectomy that left him a whisper. The strokes that deadened his right side. If a poem resurrects, how many times have I tried? I place him on his scooter, turtle speed to rabbit. I place him on the thing meant to liberate, but infantilizes. Swerve him again through the neighborhood where he breaks down. I place him in a story my parents don't tell me, but I hear my mother's part. Every conversation between them one-sided. My father's nod, his lips syncing the script in his head, his misspelled left-handed scraps of words. The boys sharing the basketball as they passed. They roll the ball into the grass, pretend to help, snatch my father's keys and throw, run away laughing. How long was he stranded? Who found his keys? My mother doesn't say. He died in 1998, no cell phone. How this century would have helped him. If he could have waited, if a poem were a bridge. I place him at home. I place my mother and me at her friends. Mother-daughter tea party, spoons murmuring against our dolls' closed mouths. Our mothers smiling, summoning some future memory of themselves as doting grandmothers. The phone insists all afternoon, our only interruption. Pranks, my mother's friend reports, returning to the table, flourishing her napkin once more into her lap. Heavy breathing. Finally, she sneers pervert, threatens the police. The calls stop. My mother and I the last to leave. I place us at home, my father on the floor, the cordless phone beside him. If a poem makes amends, the boys ask for my father's license, find his name in the phone book. My mother answers her friend's phone. I am with my father when he dies. I am patient and kind. I am the daughter he deserves. But those are other poems. So more poems kind of about my family. That's a big part of my new manuscript. I love them so much. But real quick, before the next poem, who knows the band Garbage? Anybody know Garbage from the 90s? Woo. So this is one of my strongest memories with my dad, and kind of answers the questions in the previous poem about why would I maybe need forgiveness. So a moment of connection kind of born from not my finest hour. So this is called I'm Only Happy When It Rains, which is also the name of a Garbage song. My song came on and I jerked the volume up, stomped on the gas, sang along. My only comfort is the night gone black. Since his laryngectomy, my father couldn't talk. He studied me from the passenger seat. I had to chauffeur him around after his strokes. I wished the Toyota were a rocket shooting me out of this town. Pour your misery down on me. The song ended. I'd cried through the last chorus. I'm riding high upon a deep depression. I'm only happy when it rains. He gestured to his paralyzed side, his right hand a claw resting in his lap, his right leg limp against the car door. He pointed to his chest, mouthed, "Me too." He struggled to sit up. "Me too." And then this next poem, I thought was about my dad, but I think upon rereading it, I think it's more about my mom. So it's called I Begin to Forgive Myself. After I broke my leg at 17, too late, I understood on a small scale what it was like for my father in his last years, as he stared the barrel of our staircase, cane in hand, as he balanced on his bathboard, waving the shower wand in his weak left grip. I wished myself next to him on our couch, propped my left leg on the ottoman beside his right, laugh with him, shrug hopelessly, aren't we a pair? To go downstairs, I sank to the top step, pitched my crutches through the narrow aisle, crab walked on 3 limbs. Before bathing, I slipped off the brace, my second skin. My mother washed my hair in the sink, each cup a waterfall down the drain. I don't know, the whole time that I was like wishing I could relate to my dad during that time, I was relating to my mom, you know, she was the one taking care. Also, yeah, these are sad. I get that. And I have a lot of those. So if you would like me to end on a less sad note in the Q&A, you could ask me the question of how I broke my leg, which is my best story. Any students that I have in here have probably already heard it. And you may think that that doesn't sound like a funny story, but it is. Okay. So, all right, I have one more for my mother and then on to different topics. This is also a new one. And I've been really thinking a lot about, how both of us have really struggled with insecurity in our lives, even though she is the most beautiful woman in the world, honestly. And so here's a poem about that. Oh no, our dogs are, sorry, I don't know if maybe I can only hear that, but our dogs were kind of, okay, I think they're okay. Sorry, I'm now watching my husband's screen to see if everything's okay. He's like this.
Melissa,
Yeah.
Tanta Maya and Kari tried to get in 3 times and couldn't.
Okay.
Yes.
We can see if maybe someone can, but all right. So anyway, here is a poem about our insecurities, and I hope she feels it honors her. So, it's not my mother's fault. She cast insecurities onto me, her only copy. Brightly, you and I both should lose 20 pounds. Too tall, both of us. Women should be folded wings. Never go bowling and admit your shoe size. Her lament, I want small, petite, darling feet, which I crafted into lyrics that didn't make her smile. When did I stop slipping from the bathroom before the steam cleared? When did I first feel glad to see myself, a Polaroid born from shower mist? Now I tuck my hair behind my ear, gently, finally gently. I hold my mother's hands so she can't shield her belly with her crossed arms, an action I used to think was giving herself a hug. All right, so now we are getting into poems about my tough teen years. So brace yourselves for that. This one is called Submerged. When I wore stockings and boots, buttoned my body to the neck, men still stared. One shouted guesses as I left a party. 38D? 36 double D? I sketched the funhouse mirror. Non-pregnant belly, swollen to 7 months. Hips cracked open, pushed farther apart. Breast reduction took back what men first notice. I set myself before a mirror, but wouldn't let me see myself. Tried to blink myself invisible. Rested my elbows on the surface of a cool lake. Underneath, a lock of hair from my first cut, caught in an envelope, my mother's writing. A letter my father sent me, our house to our house. Flute head separated from its body of keys. Hey, real quick, Mark, are our dogs okay? Okay, good. All right. All right, so this one is a series of tankas. And a tanka has 5 lines. It's 5 syllables, then 7, then 5, 7, 7. And it's about being 15. So I very cleverly called it the 15 tanka. All right, so. Oh, and Jen, by the way, is not a real friend of mine. She's like a composite of various friends, and then also just, I don't know, someone I made up who I like envied the hell out of. So she's just this like sort of mystical creature who pops in and out. So the 15 tanka. Learning Jen had sex, pinning on the donkey's tail, blindfold off, tails could grow from snouts, and she could stretch naked alongside a man. Holden Caulfield. Proof, Tim from English 10 loved me, instead of all those lip-glossed freshmen he took out. Jane, patron saint of good girls. On a trip with Jen and her parents. License plates, I Spy, anything to quit thinking I am the only virgin in this car. The most romantic moment of my life. Austin snapped the eraser from his pencil when I asked to borrow one for a test. Her arms, milk-colored, bedsheet soft and arched over her head, translucent in sunlight. Boys noticed her boredom, noticed my nothing. I rejected Zach before he got the joke out. The mirror told me what was wrong. Love me, I said, with my eyes, never my mouth. Youth pastor's 12 steps of sex. Step 3, voice to voice. Jen whispered, her hair braiding into mine. We're sluts. We've talked to hundreds of guys. When Chris kissed me, I worried, my breath, my braces. I didn't worry, my breasts, my zipper, whether this was something I'd chosen. Okay, I have 2 ex-boyfriend poems, and I think those are maybe important because past relationships, for sure represent other versions of our lives. And, if we'd ended up with those, in my case, much less nice people than the person I ended up with, we would be like completely different, I think. I would be completely different. So this first one is an abecedarian. So each line is the next letter of the alphabet. So it's called AA, abecedarian. An addict and I walk into the basement meeting holding hands, court appointed. We drink coffee, styrofoam cups, edge closer to the circle, finally sit. I believe a good man is buried inside him. When he becomes the bottle, I shut my eyes, try to justify his hands on my throat. Kill the drunk, not him. Love the sober, true him. Most people share only their names. A few tell stories. I, observer, lurker, fraud, pass. What would I say? Quiet girl who's never been high. Rain outside. He and I stand under the awning, waiting. Thank you for coming, he says, understanding what I don't. No veil between not him and true him. We're so good at fooling. X marks any spot we want. You're welcome, I say. The camera zooms out. We become small, smaller still. And then to follow that poem, a poem about the boy who followed that boy. And this one really does deal with the idea that, like, I've been with my husband for 17 years now. So any ex-boyfriend I have is like a legal adult, like the time that has passed since I dated anyone who wasn't my husband is 18 at least. And like, who knows who those people are anymore? We have no idea, it's so weird. I can't think I know that person and he doesn't know me. It's interesting. So this is called Blank. A guy I used to date runs by in street clothes, panic on his face, clips the corner and he's gone. We haven't spoken since he returned my Christmas card in the mail. My life, a loaf of bread. Have it. That's when I slept in his room. A port, I thought, but just more storm. Easy to blame a version of him for hurting a version of me. He could be anyone now. Fill in the blank. He's running after blank. I can't begin to guess. Doing? Are you good? This is so weird. I'm like reading totally quietly in my living room. Okay. Aw, love. So this next one is another abecedarian. I'm now obsessed with the form. I took another class from another friend last summer, Erin Adair Hodges, and she had me write my first one, and now I can't stop. So this is a more recent one. You can tell because it mentions the C word, coronavirus. So anyway, it is called Abecedarian for My Neighbor, whose name I still don't know. A garden born beyond my window, not my backyard, my neighbor's. Before coronavirus, before isolation, she and I didn't acknowledge each other. Every night my dogs burst from my back door and she sat outside with a glass of wine listening to something. I'd hush to spy, but could never tell. I imagined long-distance love, her voice joined with his, maybe Rosetta Stone, too low to know what language, no wave, no hello. Little pots line the wooden deck, matching sprigs of green. A tarp covers nothing for now. She tells me, you're the only person I've seen in days. Planting's like praying, both quests for communion. We receive stale wafers on our shining tongues, gather tomatoes fallen off the vine too soon. I'm an unbeliever who only pulls weeds, puts voids in the ground instead of life. But witness the small miracle. She was X in her yard. I was Y in mine. We're still rooted in these zones, but now our voices soar over the fence. Before I end with two poems of my own, here is another poem about planting. And it's also, you know, I wanted to read something just in light of the way our world looks right now. And so this poem is by Ross Gay, and it's about Eric Garner, who died 6 years ago. A small, needful fact is that Eric Garner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants, which most likely, some of them, in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. All right, so I've put you through the ringer. I'm ending with two joyful poems. This one is about the night my husband and I met, and it's called Karaoke Night, JB's Bar and Grill. Everything heightened the night we met. He didn't sing, he shouted, didn't dance, convulsed. If I include verve pipe, could you guess the year? When I was young, I knew everything. Instead of listening, I decoded. His voice, the voice that rouses me now. He gripped the microphone's head, that tiny disco ball. In a few years, he'd stopped smoking, but that night, a flame in his hand. My mouth moved with his. After the high-top table, 2 empty bottles, only photo in his wallet, his grandfather, whose vintage button-down he was wearing, vertical patterns like rows of stamps. I love Dawson's Creek, I warned. Better for him to know me. His Creed joke. Some said he resembled Scott Stapp. Dark hair like a hood, but otherwise I didn't see it. He tipped his head back, arms wide open. How about now? Had I ever laughed so hard? No. My water, a small river, making its way to him. He helped me mop the spill. Thank you. And then for the last poem, this is probably the version of me that's the most me right now. Even before quarantine, I guess this is a poem about how there's no place I'm happier than in my home with him and my dogs, even when they fight, which I think they did earlier. Okay, so it's called Backyard. This scooped out hole was once the Bradford pear canopying a friend and me last May, when she lifted her shirt to let me feel the life inside. Through the dark soil, the tree's roots still stretch like lines etching a cracked egg. She became a mother, I didn't. She secures the stroller's strap, follows her son to the park. She meets other mothers in the shade. The older children pile acorns in their laps, burdens disguised as gifts. They spill to the ground. At home, my husband and I read, opposite ends of the couch, my feet tucked under his side. Our tea steeps in the kitchen. In the neighbor's yard, branches quilt patterns into the sky. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you. So I think we have a Q&A next. Is that right? It doesn't have to be very long. And how does this work? Bev and Carol Ann, do I read the comments or do you read them to me? Oh wait, Bev, you are still muted.
I'm not. I can talk. You can do this however you want. You're in charge.
Okay. So I'll just look at the chat for the first time and see what some of your questions are. Oh, so many nice comments. Yay. All right. Oh, this is beautiful. I'm going to try to, okay. So,
From Peggy Nettle to everyone, love seeing
Someone
you.
write, how did you break your leg?
oh yeah, how did I break my
Someone
leg?
did?
All right.
Yeah.
Here it is. This is how I broke my leg. So when I was 17, my friend and I had the day off school because it's like teachers conference. So we were driving around and then we saw the guy I had a crush on. Let's call him Brian. That was his name. And so he was parked on the side of the street by Jock Snitch. And so we parked across the street. We crossed the street to go talk to him. His window was rolled down and I was admittedly standing in the street talking to him. And after a couple of minutes, I like took a couple steps back. I was laughing. I was like, oh, Brian, you're so funny. And then I realized that I couldn't move my leg. And it wasn't even painful. It was just stuck to the ground. And I didn't realize what was happening because I was facing him and this was happening behind me. And then I looked behind me and I realized, oh my God, I'm being run over by a car. And then I was laying in the street and this woman couldn't decide if she should get off of my leg by going forward or going backwards. So she did both a couple times. She just really, grinded it into the pavement there. And she finally got off of my leg and it all started happening very fast. Brian ran over to me, put his hand on my cheek. That's as far as we ever got. He asked if I was okay. Maybe that could have been a romantic moment, but I was all freaked out, so I yelled no. And then someone called the ambulance. Ambulance came. Ambulance guy, the EMT guy, cut my pants off in front of Brian, which is horrifying. As he was loading me into the ambulance, I was screaming over and over, will I be able to walk again? Will I be able to walk again? I wasn't sure. Then in the ambulance, they asked me to rate the pain on a scale of 1 to 10. I was like, what's 10? And they said, giving birth while your arm's on fire. And I was like, oh God, I guess a 3 in that case, because that's not nearly as bad as that. I was in the hospital. My mom was there with me in Pittsburgh for like hours before they got the Joplin doctor to come. And I was in the hospital for 5 days, missed a week of school in my senior year. And then finally I get out of the hospital, I go home. Waiting for me in the mailbox was a $50 ticket for jaywalking. So,
Bravo, Pittsburgh PD.
Yeah. So I guess the moral of this story is if you see someone you don't like and they're not in a crosswalk, by all means, just mow them down. That's a joke. Don't do that really. But anyway, that's my story. That's my how I broke my leg story. Yay, that's my favorite Melissa story, someone says. Oh man. All right, so I'm looking, does anybody else want to just ask me their question? I feel like that's more normal. You could just like unmute yourself and ask because I'm just like reading all of these comments, which are lovely, but anybody else have
one? If you can hear me.
Yeah.
Can you? Okay. I was wondering if you and your mom had ever tried writing a poem together.
No, I don't think we have my mom's face.
Wow, what an opportunity. Or your husband. I was looking at him while you were reading, and it looked like he had so much love in his eyes for you. I mean, it's just, oh, wow. So maybe the two of you could do that too.
Yeah, anybody want to write a poem with me? Let's do this,
Oh, yeah.
That would be fun. Actually, two of my good friends, Josh Davis and Allison Blevins, beautiful poets, they are like writing a series of poems together, and I have no idea. I've asked them, like, how does that even work? So I really have no idea how that works, but maybe I could figure it out. Is anyone else?
Someone asked on chat, why form over free verse, something like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Why form over something else?
Yeah. Okay. So my answer to that question is that I only wrote free verse poems for like 15 years. I was like anti-form poems. I was like, don't tell me how to write, I don't know. And also I think sometimes teachers kind of teach poetry backwards to students. So it's like you have a bunch of students in a creative writing class and you start by being like, write a sonnet in perfect iambic pentameter. That is hard. I think that's a terrible idea. I think you should be like, write a poem about something that means something to you using any words you want, no restrictions. You know what I mean? Because you're learning. And so I didn't really feel like I was ready to start writing form poems, probably until I'd been writing about 15 years. I'd say I've been writing about 20 now. And so really only in the last 5 or so have I been experimenting with that. And at first they were pretty terrible. And only now am I like, I like this one. I think I can read this one. I can put this one in the manuscript. But what I like about form poems is it kind of shakes you up a little. You can't as easily predict where it's going to go. And like what I like about abecedarians so much is you just have to really think about how you have to tighten your language. You have to really like think, where is this going to go? You have to think a few steps ahead. And it sometimes just takes you in directions you never would have expected. Like that poem about my neighbor, I never would have thought I'd put algebra into it, but I needed an X and a Y, damn it. And that was a good way to get there. So anyway, I hope that answered that question. Does anyone else have a question?
Belinda
Yeah.
wanted, oh, go ahead.
Hi, this is JT.
Hey, JT.
Thank you for the reading. It's good to see you, Blondie.
Oh, it's good to see you, JT.
I was going to ask about your teachers. What teachers brought you into the world of literature and writing from grade school on up?
Well, okay, did you say grade school on up? Because I
Yeah.
often kind of ignore grade school, and that's not cool. I remember Marilyn Bishop in 4th grade and Sandy Brooks in 5th grade really promoted the visiting writers program, or not the visiting writers, sorry, the, what is that called?
Young
Wait,
author.
young authors, yeah,
Yeah.
young authors. And they picked me because I loved writing so much to be a judge. So I got like out of class and I got to go sit in a little room and decide which poems, like which books got to get published, you know. It was really fun. And I also read my sagas about this girl, Tiffany Hunter, who got kidnapped, to all my classmates during show and tell. I think I was dark right from the start, I guess. So yeah, and then I think skipping up to high school for sure, Al Ortolani, who is JT's friend and mine, we have a book together. Me and 3 dudes from Southeast Kansas go sign. They kind of let me crash their boys club. But Al was my former teacher and he had a huge influence on me. And so, yeah, those are, and then the biggest one of all in college was Laura Washburn. If I had not ever taken a class with Laura Washburn, I don't think I would have learned that I love poetry. Because I wrote all growing up, but I wrote stories and I journaled, but I never tried poems. So without Laura, I don't think any of this would have happened. So thank you for that question. Any others?
How has quarantining, isolation, whatever, the coronavirus affected your writing schedule or what you're writing? Is it harder to write? If you're already writing dark things, does this just make it?
You know, when this first happened, I was too anxious to write. For maybe just a few weeks, I didn't write much of anything. I was just really panicked. We painted a couple rooms in our house. Like I was just trying to like expel this nervous energy. And then for April is National Poetry Month, and I've never been able to do it properly because I've always been so like busy with school. And so this time I'm like, I'm doing it. So I wrote a poem a day in April, and only one of them did I feel was good enough to end up in the, manuscript, but still, like, it felt really good just to exercise that muscle. And now I'm taking a class, like I said, with Tracy Brimhall, who I love so much. And that's really, really good for me right now. And so I think, everyone, whether they're creative or not, is handling this time the best way that they know how. And I know some people really can't do anything right now. They're just too freaked out. But I found once I started writing, it helped me be less freaked out, gave me some outlet, I guess. So I'm writing, and I'm really glad to be writing. It took me a while. That might be it then. Thank you. This was so lovely. I don't think I got a chance to read all the chat. Like if someone could send me the chat, Bev or Carol Ann, I would love that so much. I want to pour over the comments and just thank you all for being here. It's meant so much.